Daniel, I can't thank you enough for being on the CEO Global Network podcast. It's great to have you with us. I know you're a very busy person, so thanks for taking the time to be with us.
Well, it's great to be here. And I'm a huge CEO Global Network fan, so I'm honored to have the opportunity.
No, thank you so much. Now, Canada leads in AI research, but I know that you've said that we struggle. We struggle to commercialize this AI research. What's the missing link, Daniel, in your opinion, and how's your company AXL closing that gap?
So I think it's now a pretty non-controversial statement, thanks, in no small part to my colleague Jeff Hinton having won the Nobel Prize for AI work recently. I think people are trying to get a better understanding of the innovation that happens here. But it isn't just AI where we've struggled to make the transition from academia to industry. I think even earlier in computing, I watched Steve Jobs announce on stage that Apple had invented multi-touch, and that was the thing that was going to destroy BlackBerry. And I watched him announce that on a multi-touch device I'd built for my PhD thesis at U of T. And what I found so frustrating about that was Steve Jobs didn't do anything wrong, right? Like in a product announcement, you don't cite your sources, but their patents cite us. That's all fine. But I started to see this, obviously that was sort of a formative event for me, but then sort of carrying that forward in time, seeing that we've poured millions and millions and millions of dollars of taxpayer money into creating these great academic institutions. What the Americans get right, though, is the missing middle that we don't really have in Canada, which is Vannevar Bush was an MIT professor. He collaborated with Roosevelt during the war and then with Truman after the war to set up the modern academic system in the US, where government would fund the foundational research into universities. Then they would also fund what was called applied research, where the work would, the people and the ideas would make their way into these applied research centers and then make its way out to industry that would pick those things up. And then industry would pay tax and that would go back to fund the whole thing. And we get this sort of virtuous cycle, right?
Yeah.
And of course, we've heard of organizations that are in the applied research space like DARPA. And, we in Canada, we've got the universities, we've got sort of, the companies that might potentially commercialize this stuff, but we don't have that sort of missing middle of applied research. And the universities have done their best to try to make up that gap. But because we've got that missing middle, so often the Americans that are better attuned to it are reaching in and pulling out our people and our ideas and paying good money for it, but to those people in particular, and it's not going to benefit the Canadian people. And then what we're looking to do is to provide that missing middle, really.
Well, that's great. And many mid-sized businesses hesitate to adopt AI, don't they? And what is one misconception holding them back that you wish you could kind of erase overnight? Is there one thing?
I think it's that AI, as they understand it today, is not a proper understanding of AI. It's that, what people are picturing are these chatbots, right? And they boot up ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, right? Like a chatbot. They have a conversation with it and they'll ask it some business question. It'll get it wrong. And they'll say, well, this AI stuff isn't worth anything, right? But fundamentally, those chatbots are just like they're not applications. They're not actual products. They're just like a thin product demo on top of a platform. And to make it really work, you have to really work with these things yourself. You have to bring it in-house. You have to get your data into the thing, and then you can start to get the first bit of benefits. And then the next step is to fundamentally rethink your business model in light of AI. And I think those are the two steps that need to happen.
Well, that's very interesting. And I know that, at your company, AXL's tagline is human potential, AI superpowered. What does unlocking human potential with AI actually look like in practice, Daniel?
So I think the other sort of dangerous misconception people have with AI is that it will play the role of replacing people. And so this happens naturally with every new technology that comes along. Another U of T professor named Marshall McLuhan famously said that the content of every new medium is the old medium. And so with the first films all look like stage plays being put on in front of the camera, the first football broadcasts are just like plopping a camera down in the stands, right? And it actually takes decades of the use of these technologies for people to actually generate the real, like what is fundamentally different? What is the stuff that this enables, right? And so there is that dangerous misconception, and it's really just, I think of it as a lack of imagination. And so what it means to us to unlock human potential is we go deep and understand an industry and the people who work there and the opportunities of a business. And then we will use AI to create something fundamentally new that is not replacing people, it's not firing people, but it's providing them with a tool to do something they couldn't do before. So I can give you an example if you're interested.
Absolutely.
So in education, as an example, this is sort of an easy one. If you right now were to search AI in education, you'd find 30 or 40 companies that are taking ChatGPT and then training it a little bit, and then you can have a tutor at home, right? So you can, your kid can get a math tutor at home, which, to be clear, provides cool value, right? But that's a great example of I'm just replacing people with a technology, right? There I'm replacing the teacher.
Right.
But if you actually deeply study education, you learn that in education, there actually is good theory and understanding of what are the different levels of engagement that cause people to learn better. And I think just intuitively, if you think back to your math classes, right, when the teacher was like doing stuff on the chalkboard, you'd sort of understand it, but you'd really start to understand it when you did the problem sets, right?
Right.
So actually doing it yourself is sort of in the middle of the pyramid. At the very bottom is hearing someone talk about it, then someone demoing, right? You're sort of retaining rather 5%, 10%, whatever. The pinnacle of the pyramid has never been able to scale. And it's just because of the economics of it. But the absolute best way to learn something, and I think a lot of you will understand this intuitively, is to teach other people. And it's only when you're teaching someone else that you really start to get it, right? Well, with AI, we have a company now that we're starting up that isn't replacing the teacher. There'll still be a human teacher. What we're doing is reimagining education so that the student's job is not just to do problem sets. The student's job is to teach an AI that has been programmed to act like a novice who doesn't understand things, right? So there's an example of empowering people rather than replacing them.
And that's a terrific example. We can really relate to that. You've been a professor, a researcher at Meta. You're a successful entrepreneur. How do those worlds clash or complement when tackling big tech problems?
I think the complement is really that the basic methodology is actually shockingly similar across all of them. So there's sort of this famous terminology of the lean startup that is used in Silicon Valley, right? And fundamentally, what the lean startup espouses is using empirical interrogation, or in other words, put something out there, do an experiment, learn something, and then iterate on the product, right? That is science, right? Like that's what we're teaching people in chemistry in high school and universities. So I think that sort of methodology of actually using real data to prove it and to get it right, I think that works well across all of it. I think where we're seeing challenges, and I think this speaks to the missing middle that we're trying to sort of fill is in academia, there is, especially in Canada, and frankly, especially at U of T, there's sort of an open hostility to commercialization. There's a belief that, and I think fairly in a lot of instances, that money can corrupt science. And so you'll hear stories like drug companies are the ones paying for the studies. And then what does that mean for the legitimacy of the study? I don't want to wade into it. But I think there are a lot of academics who choose to be in academia because they want to pursue pure ideas, and that they believe that the introduction of corporate money will either cause them to pursue the wrong ideas or even force them to say something that isn't true or whatever, right? So, but at the same time, the universities are getting all this pressure to commercialize their research. And so the way the government of Canada has tried to bridge this is providing grant money that a company that wants to pull ideas out of a university can go and get, and then they can do what's called sponsored research, but collaborative projects with the university, and then the ideas will flow into the company. The problem, though, is I used to be the head of partnerships for computer science at U of T. What we've found is the Canadian companies that are taking advantage of these programs, by far, at least in computer science, it's global tech giants, but it's their local offices, right? It's the local office of Google, or it's the local office of Facebook, right?
Right.
So I think the real opportunity is helping Canadian companies to see the advantages and to provide that missing bit.
Well, that's fascinating. And so if you had the ear of policymakers tomorrow or this afternoon, what's the one policy change that could accelerate Canadian AI innovation at scale, Daniel?
Yeah, I think I'm going to cheat and say two. I'm sorry, I'm going to do it, John. So
Go ahead.
So Evan Solomon, we have a minister of AI now, which is great, and fabulous to see Canada's commitment to it. I think there are a couple of things. One is we have this in our field. We use a lot of what's called SHRED, and of course, a lot of the other folks listen to this know of it, and of course, you know about it, which is the Scientific Research and Experimental Development Tax Credits. And the idea is if you're doing something experimental, the government will basically reimburse you for significant fractions of the money that you spend doing it. The problem, though, is you think that that's going to spur innovation. What happens in the startup phase is these companies get addicted to government money, and then they don't want to take dilutive capital, which means they end up getting capped at this very low size because they'll never capitalize to grow. So the first change I would make is to get rid of the SHRED program, despite the fact that I expect to collect millions of it over the next few years if they don't change it. Not personally, obviously, but I mean across all of our companies that we're going to be starting. But instead, provide that money to big companies to subsidize purchasing products that would be SHRED eligible. And in that way, you're letting the free market pick the winners still, but you're Canadian companies we found to be pretty conservative when it comes to adopting some of these technologies, and maybe making it much less expensive of them would be a way to do it. And then the other policy that I would change would be to stop investing in data centers. And because I think it's sort of a silly way to spend people's money. And instead, it'd be investing in the applications of these technologies instead of the foundation layers that companies should be paying for.
That's very interesting. I got one last question for you, Daniel. You've spent your career studying how humans and machines connect. If you look 10 years out, what interaction then will feel as natural as touchscreens do to us today?
So I think the thing to understand about the naturalness of a touchscreen is that it's, it is inherently actually a pretty stupid way to interact with a computer. So the example I like to use is picture the most complicated piece of software you've ever used and say, okay, and for a lot of people that's Photoshop, but whatever it might be, right? I don't know, QuickBooks, right? And pick your business context, right? Now imagine I took that exact program and I took away your mouse and put a touchscreen on your computer. Would it suddenly get easier to use? I mean, of course not, right? So what people find intuitive about touchscreens is not the hardware. It's what has been designed for the hardware to do. And it's that touchscreens have been married to these mobile technologies where the people who design the program say, okay, this is going to be a very short transactional interaction with the system that people want to do one quick thing and then move on, right? And so that's why you get very simplified versions of the applications. And because I was involved in the lawsuit that disclosed this, although it's public, I can share, Apple actually spent hundreds of millions of dollars making commercials before the iPhone came out that were actually tutorials to teach people how to use it, so that when you first picked up the iPhone, you thought you would know how to do it. All right, anyway, sorry, forgive the history lesson. You're talking about professor. I think what we're going to find is 10 years from now, we will have so many sensors around us that are constantly collecting contextual information that the moment a computer presents information to you, it will be completely contextualized to where you are, what you're working on, what you care about right now, what is the rest of your team doing. And so you think about what fraction of your time right now is being spent on a computer, like launching the program or finding the email, right? All of that will go away. And it'll just be the high value time of you using the best use of your time with your computer. In terms of the modality, it'll be completely tied to your context, right? So if you're driving in a car, it should be against the law to use anything but a voice interface. But if you're on an airplane, you should be arrested for using a voice interface between you and me. So it'll just be about, matching it to context and seamlessly switching between them based on what you're at.
Yeah, no. Daniel, I can't thank you enough for this time together. It's just fascinating. We've got lots of other questions we'd love to ask you. So maybe you come on back down the road and be with us once again. But it's great having you on the CEO Global Network podcast. And we can't tell you how much we really appreciate you being with us, taking the time. This was really a fascinating time together. Well, thank you very much.
Always a pleasure, John. And thank you to all of your listeners, too, for their time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you.